since it's already 2:10 and I don't want to take too much of our actual introduction, why don't we get started with your introduction? If you can tell us a little bit about your background, what your professional experience is, and that would be helpful.
Sure. So I started my career in Qualcomm as a software engineer, but mostly in test engineering. And then while moving to US, I did my MBA. My MBA was in marketing. So right after that, I joined Microsoft in the marketing area, where I kind of got a taste of a little bit of data that exists in Microsoft, which got me interested in, wow, there's a lot of data work that can be done here. And so after almost 2.5 years of marketing, I decided that I wanted to move to data science. And so I tried a couple of companies outside of Microsoft and within internally as well. And I can talk about that experience with you guys as we go more into the questions, but that's my background. I'm not a developer from a background, but I have learned to code now with trying to move my career to data science.
Okay, thank you, Deepsha. And so I see that I think in your title we used, I guess, data and applied scientist. Is there any difference between, I guess, that title, data and applied scientist, and data science, or is it the same?
So it's slightly different, and this is a relatively newer term that the industry has started. And actually, Lyft has a pretty good article about why they started calling their data science teams data and applied scientists, and how they divided that into 2 different teams. And I can talk about that. But I would definitely encourage you guys to later go and check out that blog from Lyft. It's a pretty clear distinction that's now coming out in the industry. So there's business analytics teams, there is data and applied scientist teams, and then there's data scientist teams. So usually data scientist teams are the ones that are building the ML models. They're defined more as a research data scientist teams, and they've almost all of them, they've had their MS or PhDs, the ones that I've met. And then data and applied scientists kind of sits in the middle of business analytics and data scientists. So what we do is not just look at the data and say, what is the data looking like, but actually try to make analysis on that data, try to understand based on forecast how we are performing, or give insights to the business stakeholders saying, okay, based on what this data is telling us, and I can give an example. Let's say there are certain customers who are using certain Microsoft products. I don't just tell my business stakeholders how much is each product selling, but I'm able to look at all of the data that's available to me and say, okay, certain features of customers are buying certain kind of products. So based on that, maybe there's this other category of products that we need to spend more resources on. And this other products are performing better than the forecast. So an analysis that could actually help the business decision stakeholder in making a decision that they could not have made just by looking at the data directly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
I was going to add one more thing. Sorry, Ronnie.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to make sure that we loop in the data scientist team as well. So I work pretty closely with the research data scientist team, because once I have done my analysis and I want to build actual regression models on top of it, I do work pretty closely with the research data scientist team as well. So they need to go hand in hand, because the applied data science team has a business understanding along with the analytics, whereas data science team brings in the model expertise.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next question. Can you tell us what is your typical day as a data scientist? What does it look like?
Yeah, so I think I can pretty clearly divide my work into a couple of tasks. One is there's a lot of data that's spread around across Microsoft, and a huge part of it is a huge part of my day gets spent in knowing and learning where the data exists and how do I pull that data into my analysis. as all of us know, the sexiest part of being a data scientist is cleaning the data, that most of our time gets spent in it. Because I would love to say that the data is always clean, but I think at least 60% of my time goes in cleaning the data before I can even get to an analysis. Now, that's the first part of my job. The second part that I spend time on is in the actual analysis. The actual analysis is dependent upon a lot of meetings with the business stakeholders, to make sure, just with the help of data, does not have the business context in it, and without the business context, your analysis does not actually make sense to anybody. And the third most part is communication. I think I'm a firm believer on data is only as good as the story you can tell with it. So if you're not able to communicate it properly and constantly, the progress with your stakeholders, then they're not aligned in the journey. So these three are usually the tasks that I'm involved in, but I would say 60 to 80% of my time is spent on cleaning the data and then actually doing the analysis. And in our team, at least, we make sure that once a week, at least 4 hours in our day are blocked just for learning.
Okay, thank you, Chan. Now, moving on to the next question. What are the three differences between data scientists and data analytics?
Right. So as I had touched a little bit on it before, I think it'd be okay if you don't go too much in detail here. But there's no real, there's a pretty gray line now that's forming between data analysis and at least applied and data scientists. And I feel like data analytics is a pretty good first step for a lot of people before they move into a data scientist space. But there's business analytics, which is the same as data analytics, and the data scientist team. A data scientist is a person who's actually building the modeling and the forecasting of how you're going to perform. And those feature and regression models, they're built with the data science teams. A data analytics team are closer to a applied data science team. You're doing the data analysis by looking at, all right, what is happening with the data and how do we bring in the first level of business understanding to that analysis. You don't necessarily need a model for every single business question that's asked. So you, as an applied data scientist, need to know what is the right project that needs building a model for the business stakeholders and then loop them in accordingly. So that's the difference between all three teams and how they still are pretty reliant on each other in terms of getting the work done and doing complete projects end to end.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for the clarification.